Basic phrases. Action verbs and their complements. Traditional grammar has a well-established terminology for the more common complements used with action verbs. Action verbs that have complements are called transitive verbs. Action verbs that have no complements are called intransitive verbs. The distinction between transitive and intransitive verbs is widely recognized. For example, when you look up an action verb in the dictionary, you will find the following symbols right after the entry: VT or VI. The VT stands for transitive verb. The VI stands for intransitive verb. The only trouble with the terms is that it is easy to forget which is which. It may help to know that the terms come from the Latin preposition trans, which means across. Trans also appears in the English word transportation and transit. A transitive verb goes across to its subject. An intransitive verb does not go across because it does not have any objects to go to. Here are some examples of intransitive verbs. Verbs in italics. Sam snores. Sally sneezed. The children snickered. All of the flowers wilted in the sun. Notice the last example. In the sun is an optional adverb prepositional phrase because in the sun is not required by the verb to make a complete sentence. It cannot be a complement. Intransitive verbs can be followed by any number of optional adverbs. We will now turn to a discussion of the various types of complements that transitive verbs can be used with. Objects. By far, the most frequent complement of a transitive verb is a noun phrase. Recall that the term noun phrase is a collective term covering single nouns and their modifiers and pronouns. The noun phrase complement of an action verb is called an object. The term direct object is also sometimes used. The two terms, object and direct object, are used interchangeably in most contexts. Here are some examples of transitive verbs with objects. Transitive verbs in italics, objects in bold. Simple Simon met a pie man going to the fair. Simple Simon bought a pie. Simple Simon really liked it. Unfortunately, Simple Simon didn't have any money to pay for it. Indirect and direct objects. A small but important subgroup of transitive verbs has not one but two objects. For these verbs, it is necessary to distinguish between an indirect object, abbreviated as IO, and a direct object, abbreviated as DO. When there are two objects, the indirect object always occurs before the direct object. Here are some examples with both object noun phrases underlined and labeled. Sally gave the boss her report. John got the kids some pizza. When a sentence contains only a single object, as is the case with most transitive verbs, that object can be also called a direct object. However, an indirect object can never be used as the sole object in a sentence. That is, we can only have an indirect object when there's also a direct object. Sentences with indirect objects have a somewhat peculiar feature that makes indirect objects relatively easy to identify. The 2-4 test for indirect objects. An indirect object can be turned into a prepositional phrase beginning with either 2 or 4, depending on the verb. That prepositional phrase is then moved after the direct object. Here is the 2-4 test applied to the two preceding example sentences. Sally gave the boss her report. 2-4 test. Sally gave her report to the boss. John got the kids some pizza. 2-4 test. John got some pizza for the kids. Notice that in both examples, two things have happened. One, the two noun phrase objects have switched places. What was the indirect object now follows the original direct object. And two, the preposition to or for has been inserted in between the two reverse noun phrases. Objects and object complements. A few action verbs can have an object and an object complement. An object complement is a noun or descriptive adjective that follows an object and refers back to that object. Here are some examples. Noun as an object complement in italics, objects in bold. Sally considered John a fool. A fool equals John. The board named him the new vice president for sales. The new vice president for sales equals him. They elected Elaine treasurer. Elaine equals treasurer. Descriptive adjective as object complements in italics, objects in bold. Keep the room clean. Clean refers to the room. They painted the house white. White refers to house. The jury believed him innocent. Innocent refers to him. Summary of verb complements in traditional grammar. Here is a summary with examples of the 7 types of complements recognized in traditional grammar. There are 2 complement types used with linking verbs and 5 complement types with action verbs, counting the option of no complement as one of the possibilities. After the summary is a chart that visually illustrates these concepts and relationships. In both the summary and chart, verbs are in italics and complements are in bold. Verbs and complements. Verbs. Linking verbs. Is, was, seemed, became. Requires a subject complement. Predicate nominative, I am he. Predicate adjective, I am tall. Action verbs. Hit, ate, thought, knew. Transitive verbs. Intransitive verbs. We left, Bill slept. Transitive verbs. Only a direct object. We like you. Indirect object plus direct object. I made him cake. Direct object plus object complement. Adjective as object complement. I consider you rude. Noun or pronoun as object complement. I called you a genius. Linking verbs. Subject complements. 1. Predicate nominative. A noun phrase that must refer back to the subject. Butch became a football coach. 2. Predicate adjective. A descriptive adjective that must refer back to the subject. Butch was aggressive. Action verb complements. 3. No complement. An intransitive verb. Rudolph smiled. 4. Object or direct object. A single noun phrase. Santa fed the reindeer. 5. Indirect and direct object. 2 noun phrases. Santa gave Rudolph a carrot. 6. Object and noun phrase. NP, object complement. 2 noun phrases that must refer to the same person or thing. The committee named Senator Blather chair. 7. Object and adjective object complement. Noun phrase object and an adjective that must refer back to that object. The committee believed Senator Blather capable. Prepositional phrases. A prepositional phrase consists of a preposition head followed by a noun phrase object. Here's a way to represent the structure of a prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrase equals preposition plus noun phrase. The noun head inside the object noun phrase is called the object of the preposition. Here are several examples with the preposition in italics and the object of the preposition in bold. By the way, after the meeting, since this afternoon, from you, here is a list of 50 common single word prepositions. About, above, across, after, against, along, among, around, as, at, before, behind, below, beneath, beside, between, beyond, but, by, concerning, down, during, except, for, from, in, inside, into, like, near, of, off, on, out, over, past, since, through, throughout, till, to, toward, under, underneath, until, up, upon, with, within, without. In addition to the preceding list of common single word prepositions, there are many multiple word prepositions, sometimes called compound or phrasal prepositions. Here are some examples of multiple word prepositions with objects. Prepositions in italics. As of today, in addition to the assignment, next to me, in spite of your concerns, because of the budget, aside from all that, in place of Alice, on account of bad weather, in case of accident, on behalf of my friends. For the remainder of the chapter, we will concentrate on how prepositional phrases are used. In traditional grammar, prepositional phrases are always modifiers. That is, they are used as adjectives or as adverbs. Prepositional phrases used as adjectives modify nouns. Prepositional phrases used as adverbs modify verbs, predicate adjectives, or occasionally other adverbs. Grammar trivia, plural singulars. Many compound adjectives that express length, time, amount, and weight have a plural meaning but use a singular form of the primary adjective, even when it is preceded by a number higher than 1, as seen in "Try lifting this 50-pound weight." Examples: a 3-foot ruler, a 200-acre field, a 4-year degree, a 10-horsepower engine, a $20 fee. Prepositional phrases used as adjectives. We will call prepositional phrases used as adjectives adjective prepositional phrases. Adjective prepositional phrases can only be used to modify nouns. Here are 2 examples of adjective prepositional phrases in italics used to modify nouns in bold. The book on the top shelf needs to go back to the library tomorrow. I hated the muggy summers in Florida. You recall that, by definition, a noun phrase consists of a noun head together with all of its modifiers. When a prepositional phrase modifies a noun, then that prepositional phrase must also be part of the noun phrase that it modifies. The following diagram shows how noun phrases are built with adjectives in front of the noun and prepositional phrases after the noun. The parentheses around adjectives and adjective prepositional phrases mean that they are optional. That is, a noun phrase must have a noun, but adjectives and prepositional phrases are optional. Adjectives plus noun plus adjective prepositional phrase over the noun phrase. Because adjective prepositional phrases are part of the noun phrase, adjective prepositional phrases will also be scooped up and replaced along with the head noun by the third-person pronoun test. Here is the third-person pronoun test for noun phrases, specifically tailored for prepositional phrases used as adjectives. The third-person pronoun test for adjective prepositional phrases. If a noun and a following prepositional phrase together can be replaced by a single third-person pronoun, then that prepositional phrase must be a modifier of that noun. Here's the third-person pronoun test applied to 2 earlier example sentences. The book on the top shelf needs to go back to the library tomorrow. It needs to go back to the library tomorrow. I hated the muggy summers in Florida. I hated them. Here is a somewhat more complicated example that shows how useful the third-person pronoun test is for identifying adjective prepositional phrases. We should eat the apples in the refrigerator first. What is slightly tricky about this example is the word first. Is first part of the prepositional phrase or not? When we apply the third-person pronoun test, we can see that first is not part of the prepositional phrase because it is not replaced by the third-person pronoun them. We should eat the apples in the refrigerator first. We should eat them first. Adjective prepositional phrases and subject-verb agreement errors. The ability to recognize adjective prepositional phrases modifying the subject noun is especially important in spotting and correcting a common source of subject-verb agreement errors. Here is an example. A group of middle management leaders are to directly supervise employees. The writer has erroneously made the verb are, plural, to agree with the nearest noun, leaders. This error occurred in part because the writer did not recognize that leaders is locked up inside the adjective prepositional phrase of middle management leaders. Leaders is the object of the preposition of, and as such cannot serve as the object of a verb. The actual subject, of course, is the noun group, which is singular. Here is the third-person pronoun test applied to the corrected sentence. A group of middle management leaders is to directly supervise employees. It is to directly supervise employees. The third person pronoun test makes it easy to see that the verb must be singular to agree with the third person pronoun it. Learning to spot adjective prepositional phrases used to modify subjects is an important step in eliminating subject-verb agreement errors. Prepositional phrases used as adverbs. We will call prepositional phrases used as adverbs adverb prepositional phrases. Adverb prepositional phrases modify verbs, predicate adjectives, and other adverbs. Adverb prepositional phrases behave very much like ordinary single-word adverbs. Nearly everything that we said about identifying single-word adverbs also applies to adverb prepositional phrases. Adverb prepositional phrases used to modify verbs. This is by far the most common use of the adverb prepositional phrases. Here is the adverb movement test for adverbs adapted to adverb prepositional phrases. The adverb movement test for adverb prepositional phrases. If a prepositional phrase can be moved to a different position in the sentence, then that prepositional phrase is an adverb that modifies the verb. Following are some examples of sentences containing adverb prepositional phrases in italics that modify the verb with the adverb movement test applied. They have classes in accounting at our local community college. At our local community college, they have classes in accounting. We all went to a movie after dinner. After dinner, we all went to a movie. The kids quit playing early because of the heat. Because of the heat, the kids quit playing early. Notice the use of commas in these three examples. When single-word adverbs or adverb prepositional phrases have been moved to the beginning of the sentence, we can set them off with commas. This use of commas with introductory elements is not strictly required. The general rule of thumb is to use commas with long and/or complicated introductory elements. However, it is never wrong to use the comma and is always helpful to the reader to do so. Therefore, we strongly recommend that you routinely use the comma with introductory elements, especially with adverb prepositional phrases. Adverb prepositional phrases used to modify predicate adjectives. Predicate adjectives are often modified by adverb prepositional phrases. Here are some examples with the adverb prepositional phrases in italics and predicate adjectives in bold. He is unlucky at love. I am happy with my current job. We are all ready for dinner. They were wise beyond their years. Adverb prepositional phrases that modify predicate adjectives are easy to recognize. They cannot be mistaken for adjective prepositional phrases because there are no nouns for them to modify. They can't be mistaken for verb modifiers because they cannot be moved without sounding unnatural or odd. If they are moved, we would know what was meant, but we would just never say it that way. At love, he is unlucky. With my current job, I am happy. For dinner, we are all ready. Beyond their years, they were wise. Adverb prepositional phrases used to modify other adverbs. Adverbs are sometimes modified by adverb prepositional phrases. Here are some examples with the adverb prepositional phrases in italics and the adverbs being modified in bold. We got there late in the evening. Our team scored early in the first quarter. As you can see, this construction is limited. We can distinguish adverb prepositional phrases that modify adverbs from the much more common adverb prepositional phrases that modify verbs by the fact that the ones that modify adverbs cannot be moved without sounding unnatural. In the evening, we got there late. In the first quarter, our team scored early. Again, we would probably understand what was meant by these sentences, but we would not normally say it in that way. Grammar trivia, sentence ending prepositions. Is it okay to end a sentence with a preposition? Example, this is the man I was talking about. Although the 17th century English poet John Dryden famously objected to ending a sentence with a preposition, the prohibition against final prepositions in modern English is more a myth than a rule. Unless, of course, your boss believes in the myth.